because we had the difficulties, we have to go into the show. So you know what I have to say? Frank J. Parisi, let's roll 'em. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Anatomy of an Entrepreneur, the show where technical difficulties are abound. We're having a few difficulties tonight, but we're going to work through them the best that we possibly can. Right, Lori Kay?
Correct.
So before we start the show, we have to do a little housekeeping. The first one is, this show is brought to you by My Instant Office. If you need to work somewhere for a day, a month, a week, you need just a desk and a chair, or a conference room, or a closed office, come on in, sit down, and get to work. Lori, you know what we say here?
What do you say?
You don't remember?
Courtney Bino says.
No.
Oh,
we
damn
say
it.
just add yourself.
Oh, sorry.
We're also brought to you by
Okay,
the Huntington Chamber of Commerce. Lori,
Yes.
did you know that the Huntington Chamber of Commerce is the largest chamber of commerce in the world?
I do know that
How did you know this?
because you say it every Monday night.
Oh, okay. And yeah, I guess it's getting kind of a little long in the tooth, right? Now, I once went to the associate director of the Huntington Chamber of Commerce. Her name is Courtney Bino. I said, Courtney, I need something to say about the chamber. What should I say about the chamber? And her reply was, it's the best darn chamber in the world. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Yeah, that's the story. So this show, Anatomy of an Entrepreneur, our goal is to, we can just inspire one person to take hold of themselves and gain their autonomy because they want to make it on their own, or make it somehow that they know that if they have the right tools, the right guidance and drive, virtually anybody can become a successful entrepreneur. Today we have on a really cool guest. As a matter of fact, I didn't think he'd say yes, because you know he's like got a pretty cool position in life. But we're very fortunate enough to have Jim Matthews, who's a county court judge in Suffolk County. We're going to find out about his journey to success. Jim, thank you so much for coming to our humble little show.
Happy to be here.
He's happy to be here. I'm so happy. I'm always happy, especially when we don't have technical issues. Frank, are we having technical issues? We are. What's going on?
The delays going in and out.
Okay.
I think it's going to be the whole time.
Okay, we'll do the best.
Sync and then out.
We'll do the best we can.
Maybe it might catch up. Maybe it'll catch up to itself.
This is a rare occurrence for us that we have to live with something like this, but if it gets really bad, we're going to have to move the show around. But anyway, Jim, thank you so much for coming here. I really appreciate it. I hope you can put up with our technical snafus this evening.
Doesn't bother me.
Well, thanks. So, Jim, you are a Suffolk County Court judge. The first thing I want to ask you is, give us like a 1-minute bio on Jim Matthews.
Well, grew up on Long Island, went to Catholic school, then just worked my way through. You know, I worked for my parents who were working class, blue collar people, and just learned that I needed to work every level I was at. I was lucky enough to do well in school. School was a good thing for me. It came to me kind of naturally. And so I ended up going to Cornell University, which was a great opportunity for me, and then went on to law school. I went at night, which gave me other opportunities because I got to work in the field and meet lots of really cool people that helped me along. And then
Cool.
got a job. It was a nice firm, and again, I got help, and I learned a lot, and I always said yes to different opportunities. They want you to do something. Yes, I'll do it. Yes, okay, yep, no problem.
We had another attorney on who said the exact same thing, Barry Lights.
Yeah, you got to say yes. Be willing to try and be willing to put in the time. It's a lot of work.
Is it scary to take a risk when you just say yes?
Well, I mean, it's not like I'm saying yes to something I know nothing about, okay? Because one of the things you do is you got to know what you don't know.
Right.
Okay, so I say yes to things I know that I have I can do, and that I can
Yeah.
learn how to do. They're in my zone of ability.
You know, actually the same way, which is part of the reason why my last company became so successful. If a client had asked me to do something and I had never done it before, I would kind of just like assess it in my head, and I'd say, well, I know this, and I know that, and I know this. I'm going to say yes because I think between the things I know and the people who I do know, I think I can pull this off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually the way it goes.
Well, when you're doing law, though, you have to make sure you're serving the client, which means that the client needs to know whether you know what you're doing, and that's being honest about that, and being honest about anything.
Absolutely.
Is really crucial. But I got to work for a law firm, and then I realized I want to work for myself, and I formed a partnership working for myself and I with other partners, and that was a terrific experience. And I moved on to service in government as a town attorney, as a village attorney, and so that was really a great experience as well. And then eventually an opportunity came about to run for judge, and I did, and I was fortunate enough to win, and that's where I am now.
That's really cool. I want to go back to like when you were a kid. Frank, I don't know if you were able to download a picture of, oh yeah, you were. Can you, who is that guy?
Well, that was the long-haired kid, and my son is now wants his hair long, and we kind of object to it, but we have nothing to say about it. But that's what it was, 1973, my graduation from high school.
That's pretty cool. So as a kid, did you ever think about the law? Did you ever think about being a judge? Like, where was your head at when you were a kid?
Well, when I was in high school, my dream was to become president of the United States.
Really?
That was it. That's what I said. I want to be president of the United States.
And that was during Nixon?
Yes, in fact, Nixon was somebody I had an interest in, and I participated in school debates, and his was the team I represented. And but no, I had a book of presidents when I was younger, and I used to read that assiduously, and it was just something, I think that's what got me into Cornell, because I had good grades and all that, but that's a tough school to get into.
So then what did get you into Cornell?
Well, I had a lot of activities in school. I was in student government. I devoted myself to some programs to help people, and so I had good grades, but not the best grades. I mean, there were many people smarter than me, but I had top 10% grades. And when they had the interview, I remember they were asking me, "What do you want to do?" I says, "Well, I want to be president. I think I can do that."
That's
and I had that sincerity that you have, that idealistic sincerity, and that's was something I think really helped me along.
Did you think you would be president?
Well, there was a time as life goes on that you realize you're not.
Right,
But then,
at
at that moment in time, I felt I had an opportunity.
Yeah.
That I could succeed.
Yeah.
And I wanted to pursue a career of law and politics and government.
So then you had a passion from an early age.
Yes. I was in student government. We formed the first student government in my 8th grade class, much to the chagrin of the brothers and nuns who were irritated by that.
Where was that point where you were like, oh, this is really cool, I love this?
It's hard to say. Part of me was a shy person, shy kid, but at some point, I gained the confidence to believe that I could, and I was. We used to go down to Washington D.C. when I was, middle school age, and friends of the family. He was a government printer, and I got to go to read the congressional record, which now would be considered very boring, but I was fascinated by it. And I got to go visit the Capitol and to watch the halls of Congress, and I saw Bobby Kennedy on the Senate floor of the Senate of the United States Senate, and I remember we all were watching this car that had a laundry, a suit in there with the name HHH on it, thinking Humphrey was going to come out. We were there for like 3 hours. He didn't come out.
That's pretty cool.
But that was a fascination of mine. Yes.
That was around 68,
yeah,
67, 68.
66, 67. Yeah.
Yeah, because Humphrey ran against Nixon. in
Right. He was vice
67.
president at the time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you really were into this stuff at a very young age.
It was something I was.
Yeah. So, and they say entrepreneurs are passionate about what they're doing. That's how you become successful, because you're willing to do anything. So you were passionate about it, and then you got into Cornell.
Yeah, I mean, that was a combination, of course, of my grades and my activities, because part of me was drawn to these activities, these getting out amongst people, and I was a student government president. I was all those different offices. I had to run little campaigns, but also when I lost a campaign in my high school. That was a tough moment, but you learn from that. I learned that age that losing at something or not doing as well as you'd like to do is a huge learning tool. Because if you're always winning, you never really know where the bounds are.
Usually I wait a little while to talk about failure, but I agree with you that failure is so important to success.
Absolutely.
I've failed more times than I've succeeded. I don't know about you, but
Absolutely.
yeah. So tell us about how do you keep going when you fail?
Well, first of all, it really is a process to learn that failure is good. Okay, that it gives you an opportunity to learn.
When did that hit you?
Well, it hit me in high school, actually. When I had I lost this election, lost a girlfriend that I was infatuated with, So I felt like I had failed, but I was able to, deep down say, turn around and say, well, let's take a look at this. And so what I ended up doing, instead of being student government president, I formed this committee called CARE, Community Associated Relations and the Environment, and we put on assemblies and we did work for migrant workers. That was a big issue then. They were called migrant workers. That was the Cesar Chavez.
Right, Cesar Chavez, yeah.
Yeah. And we had them right on Long Island, so we gathered,
Wow.
Did food drives and
Wow.
went to visit and try to help. We also, that was the time of Willowbrook. And we actually, me and a friend, we actually went into the city one day. We were at a conference and we made a little side trip to the studios and we met Geraldo Rivera. And we invited him to our school to speak about what he did. Now, it helped that his niece, Nancy Rivera, went to my high school. That did help a little.
But you still did it.
But he came and he spoke, and from that, we started a program where kids went out to facilities. And,
Did you lead that program, or is that your...
Yeah, I was the chairman of it. We formed it.
So...
And it was that work
Yeah.
that caused the school to give me an award that said I was the kid who gave the most and got the most out of high school, because of the stuff I learned after I lost, the stuff I started doing. And that was the beginning of learning what it meant to care for others, to put others first. And now I spent so much time in my life, focused on myself. But as I've gotten older, it's become a journey of learning about the other.
And you was taking initiative.
Yeah, you have to pick yourself up. You have to stand up and say, okay, let's go forward. And that's really something that is deep inside of you. And sometimes it comes, I'm sure, I don't remember exactly, but there were people I spoke to, people who were important in my life. But ultimately it comes down to looking deep into yourself and saying, wait a second, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to do something. And so when you get knocked down, it's an opportunity to really find yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's just, you learn so much about yourself that way.
When you walked home one day and you said to your parents, I want to be president, what did your parents say?
Well, my parents loved all that, okay? I was a kid who succeeded, who had great grades, and I was an altar boy, all these other things. There certainly were things I did that weren't so good that they didn't know about, okay, as I go through like
we're all
anybody else.
kids.
Yeah. But So they were very happy with that. I remember when my first election as president of the sophomore class, they were away and they sent me a telegram saying, congratulations, may it be the first of many.
Really?
Yeah.
Your parents sent you a telegram?
Yeah, the old-fashioned telegram.
Yeah. That's so cool. And here's one of the things about entrepreneurs. They have a good support network. And it starts young. Because if it's instilled at you at a young age that you can do something, because kids are very impressionable, then that's what you learn and that's what you do. And a good sign of a sign of an entrepreneur is that they've either had a good network growing up or they have a good support system as they're going on their entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, it does. Your own personal psychology grows as well. When I had a teacher once who, I was in 7th and 8th grade. I was a smart kid, and the kids used to knock my books over and pick on me a little. And this one teacher, a brother, saw that and took me aside. And in those days, this was appropriate. He said, I see them picking on you. You got to pick one out and knock them over and punch him in the nose and just make sure you pick the weakest one, So one day I did that. I got it. The only fight I ever had in my life. I
had one of
stood
those.
up for myself and I punched this guy, gave him a bloody nose,
Yeah.
and then after that, everyone.
I had a very similar experience. My
The only
dad.
fight I ever had.
I'm the same way. I had one fight, and my dad. I got beaten up one day for doing nothing. I got home, told my dad. He said, "You got to knock this guy out." He said, "Just go to school tomorrow. You just do what you have to do." And I did it. He never bothered me again. I got into trouble, of course, and I never got into a fight again. But I never really got bothered again.
Yeah, it's not that I'm trying to
No.
say people should have fights, but
No,
at
not at
some
all.
point in time, you do have to stand up for yourself.
And I think that's the point.
And standing up for yourself may be something like that, but really most times it's a lot subtler. It's just simply raising your hand and saying, "I'm in."
Or saying, "This is where I stand, and I'm not moving from where I stand because I believe in what I do, what I say." And I think that's important. It's very, very important.
It is.
So you get out of Cornell, you get into law school, and you finish law school. Did you get a job right away?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had job offers, but the place I wanted to work at hadn't gotten back to me one way or the other, the place I really wanted to work at. So I just said, well, I'm going to call them. Okay, I called them and I said, look, I got job offers. I hadn't heard from you. Before I accepted, I wanted to work for you guys. And they got back to me and said, no, we want to see you again. And they took me in and hired me on the spot. So that was a good thing because I actually met my wife at that law firm.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So that was a real
Is your wife an
thing.
attorney?
She did go to law school,
Uh-huh.
but she decided to become a teacher later on, and that's where our heart's desire was.
That's pretty cool,
She
though.
does really good things for kids now.
Yeah, so you were working and you probably worked your way up the ladder at a law firm. You had your own firm at one point?
Yeah, what happened was I worked in a big firm, and I realized, looking at the people ahead of me, that's one thing I found was important to do, is when you think about your future, and I generally would think maybe 3 or 5 years ahead, because you can't predict how far. And I said to myself, would I want to be a partner? Because I was seeing what they do, and I said, no, I don't. Plus, I was in the city, and I realized I wanted to be on Long Island. And that's an important decision to make, is where you want to be, what kind of environment you want to be in. I wanted to have a house, I wanted to have a family. So that decision led me to get a transfer from my firm to Long Island, and eventually to meet up with a couple fellas. One guy I went to high school with, who's now a lawyer. He was in the criminal area, him and his friend, and I was civil, so we kind of put it together.
Did you have clients already? Or how do you start that?
Well, I had the great fortune of my wife was working as a young lawyer then and was making good money in the city herself. So that took care of the personal financial strain. And I walked into a bank. I knew people in the banking industry from my job, and I couldn't get a loan, but I walked into a bank and I looked the man in the eye and I told him what I wanted to do, and he gave me a loan to help me put my money in to start the law practice on a handshake.
Well, how'd you get clients?
And well, my partners had a criminal client base already, the new
Okay.
guys, and I knew people. You know, some clients from my firm came with me, and so I had some clients just walking in, and then you go to work, you treat people right, you answer their phone calls timely, and as I've always done, you got to return phone calls. Period.
But here's the thing. You had a good job in the city.
Yeah.
You were probably doing some really cool stuff, making some
Yes.
nice bling.
Yes.
Where did you get the cojones to leave and go on your own?
Well, it's something I decided and I realized I wanted to do. That's something that I felt that I didn't want to be in a big firm and deal with that environment. It's its own little office politics.
Right.
But I wanted to be on Long Island, and I felt after having been practicing there for 5 years, I had enough confidence in my legal abilities, and I have to be honest. When I was there, I said yes, and they had me doing everything. I tried multiple cases. I wrote briefs. I went to the Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state. I did so much challenging, interesting legal work. And my one worry going into private practice, I wouldn't have challenging, interesting cases. And that, of course, has not been the case at all. I've had wonderful cases.
You know, I always say that the reason why I'm here today, this is a culmination of 35 years experience. What you're seeing in this studio and what we're doing is a culmination. And I would say probably the same for you. You got to where you are through the culmination of experiences that gave you that ability.
Yeah, and there were people along the way who took an interest in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it a point to look at what other people ahead of me were doing.
Did you have mentors?
Yes, I had some mentors, and just people. I still have mentors today.
You do?
and I
That's
do a
pretty
lot
cool.
of mentoring myself.
Right, that's really cool.
You know, because you never. I'm still learning. I'm still growing as a person, and you know, but practicing law was a wonderful, fantastic experience. I got to try cases. I got to serve people. I understood along the way. I learned that being a lawyer was service to people. That clients were people I had to take care of, and it wasn't about how much I made. It was how well they were served, and understanding that, to me, is the key. Because if it's just about me, then it's just it's not what it's empty. And ultimately, I'm going to fail in my profession. And so when I learned that and really ingrained it in myself, then the law became much more enjoyable because I was out there to serve people. So I had some wonderful cases where I got paid a lot of money. I had some cases where I just did it for free for people who were really desperate and in need. One time I went down to Florida on a plane with this quadriplegic, and that was an amazing experience because he needed a place to live, and the only place was going to be Florida, and he didn't have anybody to take him. And I had been fighting the insurance company to pay for his care, and we ultimately won that case. It took years and years and years.
Wow.
But that's a rewarding experience, okay? And there was challenging legal issues involved in that, but it made a difference in this person's life, you know? And that happens with clients I get paid for, you know? And I can say to someone, I said to one businessman, you're going to pay me more than you're going to get if we just settle now. And it's important for you to understand that, and this is what it's going to cost. This is what I believe is going to happen. And so eventually, he said, no, I wanted to do it. Eventually, it came to be, and at some point we were at a point of settling, and I did manage to come up with a theory to get extra money in the case, so it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. But he was satisfied ultimately, but I thought he had to know ahead of time before. The worst thing that can happen to me is that I'm making more money on the case than my client makes, if in fact it involves my client recouping money from a business arrangement
Sure.
or some other experience. I just never want that to happen.
Over a period of time, I'm going to make a statement and ask a question. It sounds to me like you began to realize that helping others became the priority. Or maybe it was always like that, and that's what kind of led you to public service?
Well, no, let me, we help people at different times, you know, in our lives. But when I'm talking about serving people. I'm talking about as a professional doing the work in a way that keeps them in mind, okay? And I got into public service simply because opportunities arose and I felt called to that. And remember, along the way, I realized I wasn't going to be president. And
What, can we go back to that? Like, when did you realize you weren't going to be president?
There's so many people right now running for president. You could still run for president if you want right now.
right, it's a big circus.
Every other commercial is, I'm running for president.
Yeah.
I know.
But I realized I wasn't going to be president, but I was okay with that.
You were.
I was happy with where I was and the opportunities that had been put before me, you know, and I'm always grateful for that. I mean, I worked hard, but I was grateful for everything that came, and being grateful and appreciative to anybody who gives you an opportunity is really important. To be able to look them in the eye, give them a good handshake, and say
Yeah.
thank you, and to deliver yourself in an honest way, to admit your mistakes when you make mistakes, to know what you don't know. Those are all basic things you learn, but it takes time to learn those things, you know.
Right.
But along the way, I realized I wasn't going to be president. I was really happy. I was okay with that because I was doing what I felt I was meant to do, you know, and I was enjoying the law. I loved to write in law.
Yeah.
I loved to get on my feet and stand. I got to try cases. I got to do both, you know, and it was just a wonderful opportunity. The transition from being a private attorney representing private clients to representing towns and villages was an opportunity that presented itself. I wanted to try it, and I did, and it was extremely rewarding. I became a solid municipal lawyer, and in that capacity, my job, I took an oath. As all government officials do, they take oaths. And so it was my job to make sure, to the best of my ability, that everyone got the advice from me that revolved around living up to your oath. And we received many challenges, and I would give advice on the law. But when it comes to policy, that's the elected official's job. But I had to deal with department heads, and they would come and say, I'm getting pressure from this one and that one. I says, you took an oath. Let's do what we're supposed to do. Let's break it down. What are we supposed to do in this situation? What is the proper thing to do? And so that's a lot of what was important. And
How do you know what the proper thing is to do?
well, I'm knowledgeable of ethics, okay? I'm knowledgeable of the area of law, but I also teach law on occasion, and what I told the law students is, you can smell it when it's wrong. You know it.
Is it
And you
something
should-
you know or feel or both?
Well, I mean, first of all, there are good guiding principle in all government law is that everyone gets treated the same. You got to, if there's it's a difference, you have to have a reason for being different. Okay, you can't treat someone differently because in an arbitrary way because they know somebody or because they have more money or whatever. It's got to be on the basis of a reason allowed in the law, and that's just a fundamental thing of all government law. And so that's kind of how I end up. When I teach law students, though,
Right.
I also say you're going to have people you work for, and they're going to ask you to do things, and you have your moral compass, and you have to always have that. And if you have any doubts or questions, you need to have someone that you can go speak to, because there's nothing worth that, breaching that duty
Right.
at all, ever.
But we all have, like, I know there's morality, but there's this like line of morality where we have different morality within morality. How do you stay impartial? If you're on this end of the spectrum, right? How do you compartmentalize? How do you deal with that?
Well, you know, I mean, I'm not talking about what your moral beliefs are.
Right.
Okay, there are personal beliefs that you may have. It's not for me to judge any of that. Okay,
Right.
or to tell you or tell you not. But in terms of the protocol of honesty in dealing with people, there are certain things you need to do. You know, and you can't lie, and you can't lie by omission. And these are responsibilities in the law we have, but
Yeah.
I think they're also just in life, because people, especially in law, you live by your reputation. And I know that people knew my word was good on anything. Not that you have to rely on that, it can be in writing and whatnot, but you have to have that. And if you cede that, if you give it up, you may never get it back.
So, in my mind, there's a difference between legality and morality at times.
Correct.
How do you deal with a decision when you have to make a legal decision, but it doesn't always fit with morality?
Well, you know, morality that's value driven is different from the morals that reflect our laws. And so, you know, as a judge, first of all, I don't believe in this such a thing as a conservative or liberal judge. You are there to apply the law, and there's areas where you have discretion. And so I had to deal with criminal cases where I have to decide sentences and what's appropriate and fair. And I apply what I believe is fair under those circumstances. And sometimes I'm going to remand someone to jail. And I'm sorry, you're going to jail. Because you've had, the law is designed to reward people. And I dealt with a lot of drug and alcohol issues people suffered from, or which often leads to thefts and all that. And the law is designed to, happily, to encourage recovery. So if you are true and honest and go through your recovery, then we will deal with the legal system. And that's what I tell them. These legal problems will get resolved. But you need to take care of yourself first. And if you do, the system will respond to that. But if you don't,
Right.
you're going to jail.
Right.
You know, or you're going to pay a consequence. Not only with that, but in your personal life. So what am I doing there? I try and encourage people with addiction problems and all sorts of problems, and say, look, your life means something. It's valuable. It's important. You have much to give, and to try and encourage them that way. At the same time, it's not for me to judge them one way or the other, good or bad, just to encourage them. And then they have to make their own decisions.
Do you follow any of these people's journeys?
Sometimes I do. We have an in-jail treatment program right in Suffolk County. So I made it a point to visit there, to speak to inmates who are on a drug and alcohol rehabilitation, to attend some of their classes. And it was amazing. This social worker was teaching about Freudian psychology to these young men. It's young and older men, 6 or 7 of them, and I brought my courtroom there. Brought the legal aid attorneys, my district attorneys, and we sat and watched to see and learn more about the program. So when I speak to people before me, I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I can say to them, I know this program, and you've got to want it, you've got to qualify for it. I will speak to the director if you look me in the eye and tell me this is something you're really willing to do.
Right.
And then I'll hopefully they'll succeed. But we have a drug court that does more. You know, the one I don't deal with it. I didn't deal with it on a primary basis. I dealt with it sporadically compared to a drug court that does the same thing. They reward you on a very if you stick and comply with certain requirements, they will expunge your criminal records and do other good things for you. And that's the goal of it.
Have you ever struggled with the decision?
Yes, of course. And
What do you do?
well, one of the things I think I can do is be fair. I'm inherently fair, and I don't have a bias to favor someone or to not favor them because of anything. It's just the way I am, and so I have to look and see inside of me what I believe is fair and just under the circumstances. Now, on certain cases, you get the input from the attorneys. And, you know, you make these decisions. You know, I remember one time this young lady was going to go to jail because she could not handle it herself. And I said to her, that's your only option at this point. You've been given chances, and that's what's going to happen. And now she was saying, this is right before Thanksgiving, but I want a couple days. And I said, because she hadn't gone to court, she had missed court and all this stuff. And I said, are you going to come back? Do you understand you're going to come back? And she said, yes, I'm going to come back. And I said, well, again, look me in the eye. And so I gave her a week to come back. And when this was over, everyone in the courtroom, the clerk said, oh, you're crazy. She's never coming back. She did come back.
That's cool.
Because I asked her to make me a commitment. Now, was that right or wrong? That was my sense of fairness in that circumstances. She needed to go home and take care of things. Whether she was making it up or not, I don't know. But you try and judge it, each case on its own merits. You know, they pick up a lot of homeless people with crack cocaine in there, in these pipes, and many times they picked up a lot. And they come in and they don't have bail and they're in jail for a week, and then they come to me. And the DA sometimes wants a lot of time on them, and I'm like, really? Is that going to change this person's life? They're just users. And sadly, they have serious problems. Now, they've been in jail for a week, time served. That to me is fair. Right. Now, other situations, it would be a lot longer, you know. That was what I was doing last year. This year, I do more civil cases. I deal with a lot of consumer debt cases, and other circumstances where there's construction disputes and whatnot. And basically, you're weighing the evidence, you're weighing the believability of people, and there are.
It's hard sometimes because somebody's probably could be a good liar, right?
They could be a good liar, and you know, that's what anybody does. When I have a jury trial, I have to instruct the jury to use their everyday wits about how they judge people are telling them the truth or not. You know. Yeah. And there's no magic formula. It's just a question of whether it makes sense to you, whether it's believable or not. You know, and
you're not going to get a hit every time you're bad either.
You're not. But that's what we do. It's a system, and I'm so grateful for jurors for serving because they make the system work. But the system has to work too for me, because I try and encourage people to settle their cases without me doing it. But the most important thing is to respect everybody that comes in the court system. It's not about me. It's about what I represent, the justice system. And if they have judges who are showing respect, and I speak to every defendant or every person, good morning, are you okay, how's it going? Program right in Suffolk County. So I made it a point to visit there, to speak to inmates who are on a drug and alcohol rehabilitation, to attend some of their classes. And it was amazing. This social worker was teaching about Freudian psychology to these young men, it's young and older men, 6 or 7 of them, and I brought my courtroom there, brought the legal aid attorneys, my district attorneys, and we sat and watched to see and learn more about the program. So when I speak to people before me, I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I can say to them, I know this program, and you've got to want it, you've got to qualify for it. I will speak to the director if you look me in the eye and tell me this is something you're really willing to do.
Right.
And then I'll hopefully they'll succeed. But we have a drug court that does more. You know, the one I don't deal with it. I didn't deal with it on a primary basis. I dealt with it sporadically compared to a drug court that does the same thing. They reward you on a very if you stick and comply with certain requirements, they will expunge your criminal records and do other good things for you. And that's the goal of it.
Have you ever struggled with the decision?
Yes, of course. And
what do you do?
Well, one of the things I think I can do is be fair. I'm inherently fair, and I don't have a bias to favor someone or to not favor them because of anything. It's just the way I am, and so I have to look and see inside of me what I believe is fair and just under the circumstances. Now, on certain cases, you get the input from the attorneys. And, you know, you make these decisions. You know, I remember one time this young lady was going to go to jail because she could not handle it herself. And I said to her, that's your only option at this point. You've been given chances, and that's what's going to happen. And now she was saying, this is right before Thanksgiving, but I want a couple days. And I said, because she hadn't gone to court, she had missed court and all this stuff. And I said, are you going to come back? Do you understand you're going to come back? And she said, yes, I'm going to come back. And I said, well, again, look me in the eye. And so I gave her a week to come back. And when this was over, everyone in the courtroom, the clerk said, oh, you're crazy. She's never coming back. She did come back.
That's cool.
Because I asked her to make me a commitment. Now, was that right or wrong? That was my sense of fairness in that circumstances. She needed to go home and take care of things. Whether she was making it up or not, I don't know. But you try and judge it, each case on its own merits. You know, they pick up a lot of homeless people with crack cocaine in there, in these pipes, and many times they picked up a lot. And they come in and they don't have bail and they're in jail for a week, and then they come to me. And the DA sometimes wants a lot of time on them, and I'm like, really? Is that going to change this person's life? They're just users. And sadly, they have serious problems. Now, they've been in jail for a week, time served. That to me is fair. Right. Now, other situations, it would be a lot longer, you know. That was what I was doing last year. This year, I do more civil cases. I deal with a lot of consumer debt cases, and other circumstances where there's construction disputes and whatnot. And basically, you're weighing the evidence, you're weighing the believability of people, and there are.
It's hard sometimes because somebody's probably could be a good liar, right?
They could be a good liar, and you know, that's what anybody does. When I have a jury trial, I have to instruct the jury to use their everyday wits about how they judge people are telling them the truth or not. You know. Yeah. And there's no magic formula. It's just a question of whether it makes sense to you, whether it's believable or not. You know, and
you're not going to get a hit every time you're bad either.
You're not. But that's what we do. It's a system, and I'm so grateful for jurors for serving because they make the system work. But the system has to work too for me, because I try and encourage people to settle their cases without me doing it. But the most important thing is to respect everybody that comes in the court system. It's not about me. It's about what I represent, the justice system. And if they have judges who are showing respect, and I speak to every defendant or every person, good morning, are you okay, how's it going, all right? And I just give them the time of day. And you know, there were times I had packed courtrooms, and we're trying to get through these cases. The lawyers always get to go first. At some point I'll say to the people, I'm trying hard to get you out of here by lunch, and I'm sorry it takes so long. This is how the system is. I think you show them a little respect.
Absolutely.
That it goes a long way, and that's really the way life is. You give respect to get respect.
But that's what a public servant does. I mean, if you think about it, anybody in that room is paying your salary, right? Because we pay taxes, right? So,
yep. And our system is based on having respect for the law, and it starts with me in terms of since I represent the justice system. People have to come into my courtroom and feel that they've been heard, that they've been honored and respected. And that means when somebody's having a bad day, I don't yell at them. I ask them to calm down. I lower my voice. It's almost like raising kids. But you...
It sounds like you're a therapist while you're a judge.
Well, I mean, it's part of it is just understanding that people have stuff.
Yeah.
And like I was a judge also in small claims court and landlord and tenant court. And those can be very emotionally difficult issues. And my job is to focus them on where they're going, you know, on what they're saying. And I get to get out their point and help them and listen to them. At the same time, calm them down when they get a little... I say, look, you want to convince me, right? It's better if you just take a breath, because I want to hear what you have to say, you know.
Well, that's part of the respect.
Yeah, you know, and sometimes people are really rude, you know, and that doesn't give me permission to be rude to them ever. And it took a long time to learn that.
Interesting.
I mean, I have my moments, you know.
But we're all human.
I mean, But in the courtroom, I know that it's not okay for me to lose it
Right.
ever.
Right.
And it's only it's important that I show that kind of respect to people, and that I teach them that we have to. This is how we have to do it. You
Right.
know? And then,
Right.
I had a guy come in and he was just totally out of his mind, frustrating, and I let him go a little bit. And I said, "Sir, I get it. You've been coming back a bunch of times. You don't feel like it's working for you. You're losing time from work. I understand that. It's real." So just by saying that, to tell them I hear.
Well, because you're putting yourself in their shoes and you're telling them, look, I can relate to you. I can understand you. We've all been there.
Yeah.
And then you turn it around and you go,
well,
but we got to get through this.
well, and to explain to them why it's taking time.
Right.
Not just, this is it, just get out.
Right.
It will, because this is how it works, and this is why. It may not make sense to you,
Yeah.
and I get that, but there's nothing I can do about it. If I could, I would.
Right.
All right? And I just find people just have a better attitude. They're kinder. If I'm kind and respectful, they're going to be kinder and
Right.
respectful.
Which is probably what you had your whole journey. And you just developed it, is my
Yeah,
guess.
no, I had when I was a young lawyer, I would hang up the phone and get all angry and upset,
Oh, right.
and you'd have lists of people. Well, I'm not, And then as I got older, I learned. I became more mature,
Yeah.
and I learned
Yeah.
from others, and people who were kind to me, even though
Right.
I was a little
Yeah.
out of place.
Yeah, I got it. I get it.
And now when a young lawyer says, "Oh, well, we're not giving you an adjournment," I says, "Okay, the next time you call me, guess what? You're getting the adjournment." In other words, it's not a tit for tat thing.
No,
it's,
yeah.
ne- it's
Yeah.
it's never okay. I've learned to let someone who does something not so good give you permission to do the same thing. That's never a good thing to do. You always want to choose the place
Right.
that's important for you to be at.
Right.
And you're going to have bad moments. I remember being really rude at the doctor's office. I came in the next week with flowers. I said, "I was a complete schmuck. I'm sorry."
You have to bring flowers to the Jaguar dealership.
Well, I mean, people have bad moments, so it's up to forget. And in the political world, that was crazy. When I was a town attorney dealing with these politicians, that was crazy. People come out of their faces.
Yeah. Lori, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So I think that people in general say if they have to go to court, they look at you as the scary guy. You know what I mean? People have that, they're going to go, I'm going to go see the judge, and they go in with this fear. So I think the way that you address them as, a real person and saying, hey, calm down, that is probably a huge thing for them because they're afraid of the unknown. And they walk in there and you're sitting up there and they're scared to death of what's going to happen. So the fact that you approach them in this, let's just take this down a whole level and be calm, I think that's huge for you. And they're probably a little more honest about what they're saying in you saying that to them.
And if I were a criminal, I'd vote for you.
Well, and I get to teach judges occasionally. We have Judge Continuing Ed, and one of the things I make sure they understand is how you are in the courtroom sets the tone. It's huge.
Absolutely, right.
So be mindful. Just be self-aware of of the atmosphere you project in your courtroom, and so at least you're conscious of it, if that's what you intend. And judges have different styles. And there's no one magic formula. But for me, when I would go into a courtroom, I say, "Good morning, everyone. Welcome to whatever court we're at." Now, that's when I'm dealing with lots of people, not with the lawyers, but
Right.
I've had to deal with big courtroom full of people.
Yeah.
And you get so many stories about real life, that are just very, very moving. And when I first became a district court judge, I thought, well, I never did all this small claims and landlord-tenant stuff, and aren't I bigger than that? And of course I wasn't. I learned that that's just as important as a big, huge case, because it's important to that person. It's where they live.
It's a
right?
relative.
I had this one woman come in who was deaf, so we needed a sign interpreter. And it turns out she was late in her rent because she was caring for her sister who had become injured in that Long Island Railroad shooting
Oh,
that happened
right.
decades ago.
The one that happened in Merline Avenue.
Exactly.
Yep.
And her sister needed, and she just lost track of her rent. And meanwhile, she had paid her rent, and she wanted to tell me this because she didn't want me to think that she was not being an honorable person and paying her rent, that she took it seriously. But I was so moved by her and her story, and so I clapped for her, and the whole courtroom got up and applauded her.
Oh, that's great.
Just to give her, we had to make sure she realized it, that we were acknowledging her, and I was
Right.
saying that you're a special person,
That's pretty cool.
So
It's like this.
you get to, that's how it is. I learned that afterwards. You just do
Oh,
that.
You were probably like, what's everybody doing? But when clapping for deaf people is you just wait.
You know,
Yeah, well, she saw me doing this.
Yeah, so she got it. Right.
Yeah, and,
but-
and she saw the whole courtroom
that's great.
Yeah.
was captured by that moment.
Yeah,
You know?
that's really cool.
And it just reminds us that we're all in the same place, We're
If
all,
I ever caught stealing money from you and you press charges, I want him to be the judge.
Speaking
but
of
if
that,
you're guilty, you're guilty.
Right.
You're
So-
gonna pay.
So what do you do when your neighbor down the block says, I have a problem, and they ask you for a quote unquote favor? Or have you ever gotten anybody in your courtroom that you're like, oh, this
Has
is
that ever
my
happened?
son's best friend's father? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that
I have to. I
awkwardness.
recuse myself.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
hear those cases. And no, it's as a judge, it's important to avoid the appearance of impropriety,
Mm-hmm.
even though I know inside myself that I would not favor or disfavor
Right,
someone
you would
because
still be
I
fair
know
about
them.
it. But it's awkward, I would assume.
It is certainly awkward, and but that's a very important rule, and you never want to even give any kind of hint of that, So that's what you're supposed to be doing,
You know,
And people aren't going to be always happy. I'm sorry to.
no, you go ahead.
People aren't going to be happy with what you decide at times, and that's a consequence of what you're doing. You're not there to please people. I don't want it to be just because I'm nice to people and respectful to them doesn't mean my purpose is simply to please them. My purpose, my job is to be fair and impartial at all times, above anything else. But the respect part is integral to making the system. People believe in the system,
Right.
And people's belief in the legal system and our government, a nation of laws, is huge, because that's what keeps us, binds us together,
Right.
as a society, and doesn't and it prevents anyone from, just taking away people's
We
rights,
hope.
property, things like that.
Yeah, we hope. We live in turbulent times. So I have two more questions for you before we go. Number one is, I'm a budding young lawyer, and I want to make it as a lawyer. Give me some tips. Give me some help me in my journey to become an attorney. What would I do?
Well, the most important thing is to realize when you're getting into it, it's a lot of work, and you always have to be willing to learn. But along the way, you have to decide where you fit, and that's more important than anything. I mean, first of all, you have to believe in yourself, and you have to interview someone who's interviewing you. You have to have that confidence, and to know what is to be expected of you. And so along the way, you have to be willing to test and question along the way. But as on a personal matter, you have to decide whether you want to make a lot of money, whether you want to work 60 hours, 70, 80 hours a week, whether you want to have a family. Because you can't have a family and be a lawyer working 100 hours a week. So you have to decide what matters to you. And I also, where do you want to live? Do you want to live in an urban environment? Do you want to live in a suburban environment? And along the way, you're going to learn what kind of law. And never be unwilling to change if you feel the need to change.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to adjust yourself as you go along. Just because you're doing one thing doesn't mean you're pigeonholed. I mean, my career took one turn into a big firm, into a smaller firm, into government, into now this last stage
Sure.
of my career. And, you know, so I wouldn't think too far ahead. I would just think, and just look at other people who've been ahead of you, you know?
I've always said that my career found me. I didn't find my career.
That's part of life. The opportunities present themselves that you have no control over,
Right.
you know? And you make the most of what's before you.
Yeah.
And sometimes your circumstances, whether it be
True, too.
parents you need to care for or other things in your life that require your attention. Maybe you're in the reserves and you have to serve. There are many different things that happen to you, and you have to decide for yourself what's best at the time.
Right. And so then I have one more question. I've become a successful lawyer. Now I realize I want to go into public service. I want to run for some type of office. I want to be a judge. What kind of recommendation do you give that person?
Well, first of all, check your motives. And because it's very easy to be captured in an ego-driven world, of course, for all of us, in anything you do, okay? And when you have to learn a certain amount of humility about life and the challenges before you. And that more than anything, government service and judicial service is not about your ego and all the plaques you may have on the wall. It's about service above all. It's about taking an oath and living true to that oath. So government service and politics is not about making money. So if you're doing it to make connections, to get opportunity, it's not about that. And you're going to live on a fixed income. And you have to live within your means.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to understand that it's a sacrifice. And it means you have to avoid conflicts of interest. So I can't, as a judge, engage in certain businesses. I can't own businesses of certain types. I can't, you know, I have to be mindful of that so that I don't have conflicts.
Well, everything's a trade-off.
It is.
Life is a trade-off,
It is.
right? So that's not just goes for judges.
Right, but that's why I say if you want to make money, then you don't go into government service.
Right.
You represent private clients.
Right, exactly.
And you gear yourself towards that
Yeah.
kind of lucrative work. And it's not hard to figure out.
Right.
You can look at what people are doing now.
Yeah.
Like anything, right?
Yeah.
Any businessman's going to look at somebody who's done something that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
How'd they do it?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel here.
Nope. It's, you know, Woody Allen said 80% of success is showing up. You know, it's hard work. It comes down to hard work and some smarts and some luck and some seeing luck and taking opportunities. So I really appreciate you coming on here today and learning more about you, learning more about, actually a little bit more about the legal system and how one person handles a job where there can be so many different points of view, and it's very impressive. So thank you very much for coming on.
Well, it's been terrific, and I look forward to seeing you at the gym.
Absolutely. And I hope you come back on the show. Would you come back again?
If there's a good reason for it.
Okay, well, you know, when your autobiography comes, the tell-all, Jim Matthews tell-all, what do you think, Mike?
I don't think that's going to hit the stands.
Not going to be
anytime
on the
soon.
bestsellers list?
Nah, I don't think so.
No, okay. Well, but we would like to have you back when the opportunity presents itself.
Cool. Thank
So,
you.
Yeah, thanks. And so we will be back next week on Anatomy of an Entrepreneur. And following us in 1 hour is Beyond the Game with Mike and Corey Winkoff, those two lovable lacrosse guys. And so we will see you next week. Bye.